Hello, my name is Isa Lorenzo from SILVERLENS Galleries in Manila, the Philippines. I started the gallery in 2004, initially with the idea to have a photography gallery. Hence, the name is a loose mash of silver gelatin print and camera lens. So you get SILVERLENS. Back then, there were no professional artist-gallery relationships. So we felt that there was really a need for something like us. In 2006, we decided to widen our representation and work with contemporary visual artists within the Philippine art community. And we expanded that in 2011, starting to work with artists beyond the Philippines to include Southeast Asian artists and Philippine diasporic artists. Right now, we represent 24 artists. Our home base is in Manila, where we hold about 18 to 25 exhibitions across 3 galleries a year. And this year, we started doing online-only shows via our SILVERLENS online viewing room on our website, plus online art fairs such as the recently concluded Art Basel OVR 20th Century. We have been collaborating with galleries from around the region for the last 6 years as well. Now, about Korean institutions, it's only a recent occurrence that Korean institutions have started to become interested in our artists. For example, Martha Atienza and Yi Ilan have both been part of big shows at the MMCA in Seoul. Both of these artists are island-based artists who work with the environmental issues in their communities. Interestingly enough, the shows that both of these artists were part of are called How Little You Know About Me. And it's about a show of artists south of Korea, specifically in Southeast Asia. Other artists that we want to highlight, there is the painter Mit Jae-in from Chiang Mai in Thailand, who works with abstraction of color and pigment, and Gary Ross Pastrana, who's an artist based here in the Philippines, who is a conceptual artist who reimagines objects and their functions. I would lean towards history. I would start with the old city of Intramuros in Manila, which is the Spanish colonial fort that was established in the 16th century. It's still very much preserved. In Intramuros, I would visit the San Agustin Church. They have a museum and an archive, and the Fort Santiago, which is also an open-air museum. Nearby is the National Museum, and they have 2 branches. The National Museum of the Filipino People has art, visual art, sculpture, all the way from the 1600s to the present. And the National Museum of Natural History, which is in the same area. The National Museum of Natural History really celebrates the diverse flora and fauna of the Philippines, because as you know, we are 7,100 islands, and the level of biodiversity we have is quite incredible. Metro Manila is a sprawling metropolis of 16 cities with a population of 13 million people. So if you haven't been here, I have to tell you that every city is a different experience. The gallery, where I am now, is in Makati City, which is the central business district. The old city of Manila is on the bay with many heritage homes and historical streets.
Where should we have lunch if we visit your gallery tomorrow?
To have Filipino food, of course. If you were in Makati, I would recommend Milky Way. And if you were in Manila, I would recommend Bistro Remedios. Asia is huge and very diverse. Even within Southeast Asia, our art is so different from our neighbors. The closest would probably be Indonesia. However, in the Philippines, we have a very strong Latin influence due to the Spanish colonial period, and on top of that, a very strong American influence, because the Spaniards ended up selling us to the Americans in the late 19th century. So art-wise, I have to say that Asian contemporary art cannot be pigeonholed, and that each country's artists are moving in a different, unique direction. So no, I really don't want to claim a unified Asia. I think we need to respect and discover our own parts of this wonderful continent. Well, I can only speak from the biennales and triennales that I follow, that my partner Rachel and I follow, and we try to get to as much as we can. So that's the Gwangju Biennale, the Singapore Biennale, the Taipei Biennale. In Australia, the Asia Pacific Triennale and the Sydney Biennale are always nice. In Japan, has a number of triennales and biennales. We like to go to the Setouchi Triennale. I think Shanghai Biennale in China is quite nice. These are the ones we try to get to. Then of course there's Art Basel in Hong Kong, which is sort of the melting pot of all of this. Well, initiatives like Art Plant Asia are really going in the right direction. This is the time to share information, to innovate, and to get to know each other. It's, because at some point we're all going to be able to travel again. And wouldn't that be great if we could see each other in person and finally see all the pieces that we've been seeing on screen? Gallery to gallery collaborations we've been doing for about 6 years now. Online art fairs are happening and improving with every edition. I see that there will be online platforms that will come up that will not be city-based or geography-based, but their own contemporary art platforms for like-minded galleries. The biggest challenge, I would say, is the economic uncertainty and the psychological effects on people not wanting to buy art. So we have not been able to travel. That's another challenge. But at least the art can travel. Art can move because art can't get COVID. The advantage is we have been super busy here at home. The galleries have been open since June and we've been receiving guests by appointment. People have been coming. We set up a media team, our media team in the early 2010s. So we had them in place for the deep digital dive when we really needed it to happen. The outlook is generally fair. I think if the gallery is able to survive and thrive in this environment, when the world opens up, we will be a much stronger gallery and a much stronger ecosystem. I think that the pandemic really shone the light on what's important and the stuff we don't need to do anymore. I think good art will always find a home. And the key is, as it has always been, is for the right eyes to see the work. That's it. Thank you very much to Art Plant Asia for inviting SILVERLENS and myself to be part of this set of, getting to know me, getting to know us. I'd like to thank Pat Lee, who's been a friend, who's been an art friend for many years now. And that's it. Thank you. Goodbye from Manila.
Introduction. My name is Pat Lee. I am a director at 갤러리현대. I recently joined maybe a little over a year ago. Previously I was a partner and ran 1NJ Gallery for the better part of 13 years. Both galleries are based in Seoul, Korea, from where I'm recording this on a nice brisk 7-degree morning. As I am outside, apologize for any extraneous noise, hopefully you can hear me. 갤러리현대 is the oldest commercial gallery, or at least one of the oldest. It was established in 1970 and this year celebrating its 50th anniversary. Question 1. Well, I think the basis of strength for any primary gallery, of course, is the strength of its relation with the artists and the eye of the owner, the direction, the color of the program. It's not a profound answer, I guess, but 갤러리현대 really has gone through many iterations. Is my observation. It's 50 years old, and also going through a transition from the founder to next generation. It's a family-owned gallery, family-run gallery. So, I've seen the gallery sort of move from one end of the spectrum to the other within the span of 10 years. And I think my mandate, the reason I was brought on, is to try to focus the program a bit more from the primary gallery perspective. So, ideally, I'd love to see this gallery build on, its legacy, working with just some of the most important artists working post-war Korea, and I think especially experimental artists in the 70s, heavily involved with. Right now there's a Isun Tech retrospective that's going to open at the MMCA in a few weeks, and galleries knee-deep in that. Artists like Lee Gun-young, Park Hyung-gi, Kwak In-sik, Lee Seung-jo, John Bae, Lee Gang-so, artists like this. They're just really phenomenal artists. And then you have more, maybe less experimental artists, but incredibly important artists like Kim Chang-yeol, who has a show at the gallery now. It's a fantastic show. Just major figures in post-war Korean art history. I think this gallery has the experience and the history to build on that, and I love to see that continue as supporting these artists and their practice to a global audience. Of course, I'd like to strengthen the relations with the mid-career Korean contemporary artists. Right now, the gallery works with Moon Kyung-won and Jeon Jun-ho, who very well-known artist practice, fantastic. Lee Sul-gi, Choi Min-hwa, Lee Myung-ho, Kim Min-jung. These are all artists, who have stature and really interesting practices. And of course, I love to bolster the program with dynamic artists that are not part of the program yet, but I hope the gallery direction appeals to them. We can build mutual trust to work together. And there are artists like Kim Ah-young and Kang Seung-lee, Kelvin Park, Bob Gill, all great artists who I hope to engage in discussions with. But there's so many more. So that excites me as well. I better keep going. Question 2. Well, Korea is an incredibly dynamic city. I love living in Seoul. I think people who visit also enjoy the city. I think the history of contemporary art is a relatively short one. Maybe that goes for much of Asia as well. But there are fantastic institutions from the traditional fine art. I could recommend many places. Of course, in the museum level, there are great government-run museums, also corporate-run museums. I think MMCA obviously has great shows. Seoul Museum of Art also kind of very curatorial ones, and also some for the masses, but also quite interesting. Ilmin Museum, Art Sonjae, I think, is probably the most influential from a contemporary art perspective. And then you have some corporate-run spaces, I think also very interesting. OCI is one that focuses mostly on emerging contemporary artists. Then you have the bigger collections like the Amore Pacific, fantastic new building designed by David Chipperfield. I would highly recommend people visit. And then you have artist-run sort of non-profit places. Also very interesting stuff. Doosan Gallery is always very strong. Sarubia, historically relevant. Some places who unfortunately have no longer in existence, but still active from writing perspective. You can check out their work. Audiovisual Pavilion, very influential. I think Pool, Loop, Space One. I'm sure I'm missing many. The commercial galleries, I think there are some pretty good ones. I think if I were to say there was a weakness in Korea, it's probably the primary galleries. But you know the major ones, I'm sure, the Gukje and Hyundai, PKM, 1NJ's, P21, very interesting contemporary program. Whistle, also a nice program. Baton, good gallery. Yeah, so there are a lot of places. If you need recommendations, feel free to email me anytime. I'd be happy to make more suggestions. Question 3. Lunch. Well, unfortunately, near the gallery is not the place for foodies. Believe me, I've looked, but Korea has amazing pockets of places to explore. It's a very easy city to get around. So if I were to take you out, people will know me. It wouldn't be these sort of chic, high-end fusion places. Of course, there are a gazillion of those places. I would take you to very local, market for mung bean pancakes or noodles or something like that. So yeah, food is amazing here. Question 4. Oh, this is a big question. Oh God, meaningful definition. Well, I think short answer, yes. Of course, I think Asia as a region, there is some. Well, there's definitely a sense of camaraderie. I would say yes. I can point to traveling exhibitions within the region. Recently, there was one called Awakenings. I think was a fantastic exhibition that showed in Seoul, Tokyo, also to Singapore. It celebrated, sort of political art, a lot of performance. Very interesting show. And of course, you have the biennales. I think very regional. That really helped contextualize the practices from very dispersed regions, countries. It's hard to do that, but I think they've done some very interesting things. Singapore Biennale, Gwangju, of course, Taipei. You come away seeing some interesting things. I'll address some of other points in. Yeah, so to expand on sort of this Pan-Asian concept, especially for what Art Plan Asia is attempting to do as a platform for Asian art. I feel very fortunate to be in Seoul and to be so close to compelling art from this region, and I think my experience have been very fortunate to travel and see things, very eye-opening things, and I think some of the galleries that we're participating in these interviews are very important for that. Just to give brief comments, like Jakarta, June at Row. Just a good friend, amazing person, a great eye, lover of art. Machan visiting there, what Aaron Cito's doing there. When they first opened, I was there and I saw Melati Suryodarmo, butchering the name I'm sure, but her performance with the ink, I mean, it was mesmerizing, so visceral, so powerful. I mean, just to see art from that region in that context, felt very fortunate. So, Manila, what Ye is doing is really interesting, and my friends from SILVERLENS, love them and amazing stuff. First time meeting them years ago at Art Basel Statements from Maria, was showing there and remain friends to this day, and also great collectors. Good friend Marcel Crespo, who really took me around, showed me his favorite places. These are important. These really help to be ambassadors for the art. Hong Kong, of course, Edouard Laurent, what they're doing, amazing stuff. M Plus Museum, going to be, I hope, a big beacon for the region. I think they're looking at all different countries. I think that's going to be a very important thing. Shanghai, of course, with Matthew at Bank and Simon in the tennis space, and really interesting small spaces that I love going to Shanghai to see galleries and Capsule and places like that. I think Condo was an interesting project they did in Shanghai. 1NJ did it. At the time I wasn't there, so I didn't participate, but I think the whole idea of that collaboration was very important. Taiwan I don't know as much, but of course they have the Biennale, and I think very highly regarded. Japan, of course, probably the most well-structured. And Singapore, again, the Biennale and working with Eugene has been very fruitful for us. So yeah, I think there's so many great platforms. Yes, gallery-to-gallery collaborations. One of the reasons I'm close to many of my colleagues is because we always have dialogue and how we can collaborate. And I know that FOST, Rowe, SILVERLENS, Milan had loose affiliation, and I wanted to be a part of that when I was at 1NJ. So I think that would have been a really nice thing. But it's just one example of how people with similar visions can support and help each other. I remember New Tokyo Contemporaries was a small loose affiliation of like-minded galleries, and I wanted to replicate that in Seoul at a time. But I think that's whether or not there's association or not formally, there is communication and dialogue. I think that's a very important thing. And last question about obviously it's been affecting the world. It's just an unfortunate thing, but I do feel that there's light on the end of the horizon. Not being able to travel, let's focus with things here in Seoul. Not necessarily a bad thing. Engaging with art professionals, collectors. Of course, not being able to travel is difficult, especially when we have plans for projects with artists globally. But I hope that sooner than later we will be able to normalize to some extent. So I think next year will be a more positive one, and I look forward to that. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Art Plan Asia, for having me. My name is Stephanie Fong, and I founded FOST Gallery in Singapore in 2006. Following the tradition of naming galleries after their founders, FOST is a combination of the first two letters of my name. In 2012, we moved to our current premises in Gillman Barracks, the Contemporary Art Precinct in Singapore. Some say timing plays an important part in any successful business. I started the gallery when there was a niche in exhibiting contemporary art, especially by artists living in Singapore. Few galleries at that time based themselves on a Western model of commercial gallery. That is to say, working exclusively with a roster of artists over a long period of time and having exhibition programming. Many of the galleries then in Singapore function like retail shops. Hardly any curation beyond perhaps a sense of aesthetics. However, they played an important part in our journey in art collecting. Many of us made our first art acquisitions from galleries like that. In many ways, they were much less intimidating than a white cube space. However, I wanted to start a gallery which initiated deeper conversations, and I wanted to work with artists on a more meaningful level. And as the gallery evolved, we started to work with artists outside of Singapore. We've had the privilege of working with some really amazing artists, and the success of the gallery really depends on the artists whom we work with now and in the future. FOST Gallery is known for its dynamic and rigorous exhibition programming. We are a platform through which artists from different backgrounds and generations can explore their own forms of artistic expressions. Through their own distinct visual language, we hope to offer new perspectives and open new channels for dialogue. One of the abstract painters whom we represent, Yen Wu, has exhibited at the Busan Museum of Art. I feel that Korean collectors may be able to connect with his abstract style of painting because firstly, abstraction is universally appreciated. It has no representational elements that can root the painting in a particular nationality or culture. Secondly, Korea already has its own history of abstraction in movements like Dansei-kwa. And while Yen's paintings are not monochromatic, I feel it is a visual language that can be well understood by Korean collectors. One of the things I miss most because of the current pandemic is being able to host overseas visitors to Singapore. Of course, I will bring them to Gilman Barracks to visit both my gallery and the other galleries in the same precinct. The National Gallery Singapore is also always on the list. Not only does it show a significant portion of modern art from our national collection, it occupies the magnificent buildings of the former City Hall and Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Singapore Art Museum, which exhibits contemporary art, is closed for the next few years for a major refurbishment. If my guests express interest in any other aspects of culture, I will offer to bring them to the Asian Civilizations Museums or one of the heritage museums. Much of understanding culture is also through food, and I will conclude with a meal at a restaurant which serves one of the local cuisines. I'm afraid there is no easy one-stop solution to making Asian artists more recognizable on the international art stage. This dominance stems from also a dominance in world politics, media, scholarship, language, etc., and also a much more established art market ecosystem. But I do sense that power balance slowly being shifted because Asia has been experiencing unprecedented economic growth. However, my biggest concern now is that even with more attention to this side of the world, with a multitude of languages, dialects, and histories, what lens are we going to use to view contemporary Asian art? We have seen all of the above efforts being made on like art fairs, gallery-to-gallery collaborations, SNS, well before the pandemic struck. I think the crisis just made it more crucial to communicate via different platforms and modes. I think we have seen all of the above efforts being made, gallery-to-gallery collaborations, online art fairs, communicating via different social media platforms, well before the pandemic struck. The crisis just made it more urgent to communicate via different platforms and modes. For the gallery, the biggest challenge is the restriction on travel. We cannot meet new collectors, curators from overseas. On the upside, we've been receiving many inquiries from people new to collecting art in Singapore. I really cannot imagine how we would be able to communicate if not for the advances in communications and technology. I think the experience would have been even more isolating. However, I don't for one moment think that online communication can replace meeting in person. We are a resilient, adaptable species, so my outlook is cautious optimism.
So my name is Jun Tirtaji, and I am based in Jakarta, Indonesia. And I run a gallery called Row Projects. It's a gallery that was started in 2013 with the purpose of working with artists from my generation and giving them both a local infrastructural support as well as international exposure. Well, the two most important basic kind of reasons for our success is, first of all, the support that we've had from our artists. The relationship that we have between the gallery and the artist is much more like family, and we all have this shared goal and vision to grow together. Secondly, we've had so much support from other stakeholders, both in Indonesia as well as abroad, and this comes from the vantage point of collectors, but it also comes under the vantage point of curators, writers, and just a general support from many different angles. So maybe there's a cliche that no sort of island can stand on its own, but in our case, it really rings true that we've had so much support from so many different people, and that's why we've sort of had some sort of form of success, I guess, in the gallery. I think this is a super interesting question, because if we look at the ontology of what contemporary art is, or has been defined, contemporary art itself has been considered very much a Western construct, that it falls within like this greater canon of Western art history, and contemporary art is thus an offshoot of that. So when we then think about what Asian contemporary art is it then just a footnote to what contemporary art as a whole is? What I find interesting is that there has recently been many challenges to this definition, and although there isn't like one like set answer to this question, I think that efforts such as what Cornell University is doing with ICM, or the Institute of Comparative Modernisms, I think is very interesting, because they're really trying to look back now into history and looking to sort of decentralize the idea of how our idea of contemporary art or histories itself has sort of been rooted in not only a single sort of like branch of modernism, but I guess a much more multi-faceted and multi-perspective way of looking at how things have originated. And many of these things may not have necessarily only been rooted in the West. It requires much more of a nuanced, sort of complex understanding of many different sociological, anthropological, and philosophical factors. Well, actually, I've been really fortunate to have gotten the chance to go to Seoul a couple of times, because I was invited by a museum, or maybe more of an alternative space called the Sungwon Foundation, which is in Seoul, to curate a show there of a collective of Indonesian artists. The collective of Indonesian artists is called Mass 56, and they're actually a collective of contemporary photographers based out of Yogyakarta. So I've always had very fond memories of going to Seoul, and these fond memories are really because of the generosity of this foundation, which is run by this benefactor called Chairman Yu, and the director of the foundation, her name is Laurencina Ferrand. And the experiences in Seoul have always been great, because they were such great hosts, and they really took us around to see sort of what the cultural landscape with regards to contemporary art is like in Seoul. So our relationship now with the foundation is also maybe perhaps also like family. So I see Seoul in some ways as a second home, maybe because of them. So when it comes to Korean artists, I've always enjoyed many of the more emerging kind of practices there. And again, the way that I have been introduced to sort of more emerging kind of Korean artists and practices is through following the Someone Art Foundation Art Award that they hold every year, where they really, I think, filter out and select some of the really strongest Korean artists, maybe from younger generation. But personally, I've always been fascinated with Haegia, and I think that her practice really resonates with my own thoughts, and her conceptual ideas, I think, are always breaking new boundaries. I think she's really an artist that inspires us because she's been able to transcend geographical, cultural, and social kind of boundaries and speak to a much wider universal audience without losing her own language, I suppose. I think she's an amazing artist. Well, on this question, maybe I have perhaps a contrarian approach towards this, where I sort of feel that the experience of seeing art in person and the encounter and the experience can never really be replaced by the new digital sort of platforms and technologies that we have to try to sort of replace those experiences. So in my opinion, perhaps now is really the time for us to really reconsider about how we can dig deeper into building our own communities from a local standpoint. I foresee perhaps in the future that it will be more difficult for people to travel and see art themselves. And again, perhaps some people may say that because of sort of these digital platforms, online viewing rooms, and new technologies, that perhaps it's easier for us to encounter art. But I would argue that those ways of encountering art are still going to play sort of second fiddle, or will not be able to replace the idea of actually encountering art itself. The idea of being immersed in an installation that an artist sort of develops, or looking closely into the textural brushstrokes of a painting, or the sort of physicality of more sculptural works, I think is something that is still very much irreplaceable. And I hope that this inspires sort of galleries to really reconsider how their position in their local sort of environments can sort of be intensified or deepened in terms of its dialogue with its surroundings. I hope.
Hello everyone, I'm Peggy Lin from Project Fulfill, Art Space. We are based in Taipei, Taiwan, and we are 13 years old. Contemporary art gallery, and yeah, let's start with the question. It's from artist selection, exhibition planning, and customer service. And our customer service including artists, collectors, art professionals, and general audience. And the third key element, I think, is focus. We need to have passion and also at the same time patience. And what's that? Describe core components of the program. I think we are project-based, and this actually is echoing our name, Project Fulfill. And also our program also very diversity. Relationship with the Korean, I think 2018, Kim Song-jong, she had curated a show with the young artist collective called Loom, L-O-M, which was also my first Korean artist exhibition in the gallery. Would I introduce any interesting artist? Yes. Our artists Zhang Xujian, Xian Muqi, Wang Shang, and Yuko Mori. Okay, second question. Of course, Taipei Fine Art Museum. And third question, lunch around my gallery tomorrow. I'll show you Taiwan cuisine for sure. I think the fourth, my answer would be each country in Asia is very, very unique, but at the same time, somehow, I think we share some similarity and which connect each other together, like history or somehow culture. Korea, beautiful building, beautiful people, and strong, I think Korean has really, really strong corporate collection, and there you are very, very support arts, including celebrities, which impressed me a lot, and of course, good food. Number 6, Korean artist. For young artists, of course, the one I work with, the Loom Art Collective, and for established, I think Do Ho So, and also Chung Young-do. Okay, number 7 question. Okay, so to see some shows or good exhibitions, we have Taipei Biennial, Asia Biennial, Wonju Museum that frequently inviting Korean artists or researcher to go to the school to do some artist residency. Hanggang Museum, they are really focused on video art and video. They host a video biennial. And for collectors, there is one that's really, really nice. It's called Wenxing Art Place. And galleries, of course, me, Project Fulfill, Mindset Gallery, Double Square Gallery, and also TKG Plus. I think there are many curators from Asia who are now working in very important museums around the world, which is a really, really good sign for artists and to be seen, because they are inside and they would recommend the artists to participate in the shows. Number 9, utilizing the technology. I think for us, gallery-to-gallery collaboration, we've been doing that since day one. So it's not a new thing for us. But we started to really use a lot of social media, like Facebook already, and then start from this year, Instagram. And online platform, we have our website and also Artsy. We started to work with Artsy already. But still, I think contacting through email directly, personally, to collectors and curators is still the key. So it is to maintain the relationship and then to update them the artist news. I think that's still very important. What's the challenge and advantage? I think challenge for us in general is the so-called the online viewing room from the art fair. I think it had failed our trust, people's trust since day one, because it's still not convenient to use. So I think that's for not only art fair, but for participant art galleries, it's still a big challenge. But for the advantage is, I think this is like very interestingly, collectors are still very, very craving for new works. They they are really eager to buy, they want to see new things and then really want to collect. So I think personal contact is very, very welcome, and it's still very important. So I think that's about it. Thank you so much. I hope to see you in Seoul in person very soon. Bye.